In this video, we're going to do a chart with me of a famous person. It's someone perhaps you already know. Maybe it's someone you'd actually like to get to know, and if not, then it'll be certainly news for you. This time we're going to be looking at the chart of Yuval Noah Harari. So what we're going to work through is we're going to go through and pull out a high-level extraction of the information using the 5 key points to chart reading, so that we have the important things that we need to talk to this chart about to start with. Now, typically you would put this information that we're going to extract now, put it into your margin and body to prepare yourself to get ready to do chart reading, and I'll talk about that in another video. So let's get started. Hi, I'm Alison, and welcome here if you're new. On this channel, I like to bring concepts of astrology and ideas about astrology reading and how to read charts and the meanings of astrology in a simple form for everyone to understand. I don't believe astrology needs to be in the ivory towers of only a few people. I do believe that most people will benefit from knowing a little more astrology than you do already. And if you're new here, welcome, and do feel free to write your sun sign in the comments below. So let's get into the chart with me section. So we're doing a chart with me for Yuval Noah Harari. You may know who he is, a historian, philosopher, and best-selling author. Now, Harari has written several books, but 3 are more popular than the others. First up, we have A Brief History of Humankind, Sapiens. Incredible book. Then he wrote A Homo Deus as well. And finally, recently, the 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. These are books that will change the way you think, so I urge you to go out and read them. So we're going to be looking at his chart. So the birth details for Harari are, we have no birth time. So this is an interesting thing, and it's, in a way, it's a bit of a lesson how to work with birth charts when you don't have a time. So I'll be explaining that in a moment. So we don't have a time, but we do have the date. It was February the 24th, 1976, and he was born in a place called Kiryat Atta in Israel. So with an unknown birth time, there are, I don't want to say everyone, but there's a lot of people will come through to you as an astrologer and they won't have a birth time, and you have to know how to work with their chart in these situations. So the first thing you're going to do is actually cast the chart for noon, because that means that he was either born in the 12 hours prior to noon or the 12 hours after noon, and therefore the chart will only be 12 hours out, which isn't as much as 24 hours out. So this is why you always cast the chart for noon. But of course, we do have to consider that the moon's position may be, the moon will typically move 12 to 14 degrees in one day. So it could be 7 degrees before or after its noon position. So that is definitely one thing you have to pay attention to, that we will not know the position of the moon, and in some cases we won't know the sign of the moon either. And this is particularly one of those cases, because his moon is actually there at 29:51 Sagittarius at noon. So we can see that there's actually going to be a question about the moon's position, and the moon could be in between 23 Sagittarius and 7 degrees Capricorn. So let's just have a closer look at that. We can see that in the noon chart, the moon was at 29 degrees 51 Sagittarius. So that's right on the very end of Sagittarius. And at 0 a.m. on that day, the moon would have been at around 23 Sagittarius. It will have traveled all the way up to the 29 during the morning. And then afternoon, it would have had the potential to move up to and including 7 degrees Capricorn. So then in general, if he was born in the morning, he will have the moon in Sagittarius, and if he was born in the afternoon, he will have the moon in Capricorn. And that is what we have to bear in mind. Therefore, we don't know the sign of the moon or the position of it by any stretch. Sometimes the moon will be within a sign and you know for sure which sign the moon's in, but in this case we have the option of Sagittarius or Capricorn, and we may need to consider that later on as well. So just to be clear on the defaults which I'm using, for this birth chart, I'm using the tropical zodiac, and this time I'm using the 0 Aries house cusp, because we don't know what time he was born. So technically the house cusp themselves will fall away, and so will the ascendant. So that's why I've calculated the chart for 0 Aries. So as we're doing the chart with me, there are 5 key points in this chart that we're going to be looking through, which we do in all charts that we ever do. And the first one is the balances. We're then going to be looking at the ascendant complex, the chart ruler complex, We'll be considering the luminaries, complexes, and any major aspect patterns within the chart. And these are standard interpretation key points that we use. And if you want to know more about that, you can check out this video, Quick and Easy Chart Readings, where I offer you my 5-point method to read a chart. And you can go back and watch this video if you really want more clarity on what I'm looking for in the 5 key points. So first up, we're going to be looking at the balances for him. And this will be broken into 3 components of polarity, element, and mode. And we are going to look at each one of those in regard to his chart. So we're going to be doing a count on the planets in signs to decide which polarity, element, and mode the planets are in. And because of that, the big question then is, which planets do we count? So because we want quality over quantity counting, we are only going to be counting these 7 visible planets. Many astrologers will do it other ways. They'll count in the Ascendant, they'll count in the outer planets, they'll count in the asteroid, the midheaven, what have you. But I don't. I count for quality counting. We just want the 7 visible planets. And to be clear, the 7 visible planets are the Sun, the Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. And they're called the visible planets because you can actually go outside and look up and see these planets with your eye. So we have this handy grid where we're going to break down. We've got the elements across the top, we've got the modes down the side, and we're going to do a count for this chart. So first there's Jupiter in cardinal fire. If the moon was in mutable fire, which would be the Sagittarius position, that would be in that placement there. There's nothing in Earth. He then has 3 planets in air, Mercury, Venus, and Mars, and then Saturn and the Sun in water. So these are, when you add them up, down, and across, you get the actual numbers that we're going for. But there is a question on the moon's position. So we're now going to consider the moon in the other sign that it could be. This is the Sagittarius position, and then if it was in the Capricorn position, we would have a slight shift in the energy here. Now we've got the moon up there in the top on the cardinal earth section, so you've got the 3 cardinal, only 2 mutable. So there's been a slight shift there of energy, and now we see we've got the 1 earth planet. So the question is the moon in Sagittarius or Capricorn? And we are yet to decide that. We don't know yet. We may never know, but at the moment we don't know. So we're looking at these things in 2 ways. So typically we would count the 7 visible planets, but because there's a question over the moon, I'm going to dismiss that, and we're actually going to only count the 6 visible planets. So because we're just going to be counting the 6 visible planets, excluding the moon, these are our firm numbers that we have now. So we've got Jupiter and Saturn in the cardinal, and then Mercury, Venus in the fixed, and mutable is Mars and Sun. So we do have a 0 in Earth, and we'll look into that in a moment. Although we've had to take the moon out of the equation, what we have left, which is the 6, is 100% correct. So the first thing we're going to consider is the polarity. So the active, passive, masculine, feminine, positive, negative. That is the polarity. And this is the broad stroke you could do over a chart. Here we can see that the active planets are circled in red, and there are 1 in fire and 3 in air. So we've got Jupiter, Mercury, and Venus, and Mars. They are all circled in red, and they are of the active polarity. Then we only have 2 planets actually in the green, which is the passive. That is the Sun in Pisces and Saturn in Cancer. So we can see quite clearly that there is an emphasis on the active polarity for him. Now, again, if we finally make a decision about the moon one day, it will either be in active Sagittarius or passive Capricorn, but either way, active will still dominate, because even if the moon ends up being in Capricorn, which is passive, it still is not enough to overweigh the active, which actually has 4. Right, so now we're going to be looking at the 4 elements. So the elements are fire, earth, air, and water, and we're going to look at those within the chart. So now here we're looking at the elements, and you can see quite clearly there's 1 in fire. That is the red one. That's Jupiter and Aries. And in air we have 3 planets, Mercury, Venus, and Mars. They're circled with the yellow. And then we have 2 planets in water. That is the Sun in Pisces and Saturn in Cancer. And so that shows you the elements there. And we can see quite clearly that there are 3 in air, which is strong-ish, and then 0 in earth. So as the air element has 3 planets, it is the dominant element, and we would say this chart is particularly airy. Next, we're going to be looking at the modes. And we have cardinal, fixed, and mutable. They are the three modes. So going back to our table, you can see there we have the Jupiter is in purple and Saturn is in purple. Jupiter is in Aries and Saturn is in Cancer. In the purple, in the fixed, which is the turquoise, we have Mercury and Venus. They are both in Aquarius, which is a fixed sign, so there's 2 for fixed. And then we have 2 in the mutable signs. We have Mars and the Sun. Mars is in Gemini and the Sun is in Pisces, which are both mutable signs. So clearly we can see that we have 2 cardinal, 2 fixed, and 2 mutable. So there is no preponderance in any of the actual modes. That's quite clear with the totals there. Next, we're going to be looking at the Ascendant complex. And we would consider the Ascendant sign, the aspects to the Ascendant degree, and any planets in the first house. And this will be our next key point to look into in the chart. But as we do know, we don't have a birth time for Harari, so his Ascendant sign at this stage is unknown. Likewise for the Ascendant aspects, because we don't have an Ascendant degree, then therefore we cannot say which aspects are pointing towards the Ascendant. And by the same token, we cannot tell which are his first house planets, which is part of the Ascendant complex. So it's unknown because we don't have a birth time. So without the birth time, as I said before, you don't have an Ascendant and you don't have house cusps. Next up, we're going to be looking at the chart ruler complex. That would be your next key point to go through. So the chart ruler is the planet that rules the Ascendant. And typically with a chart ruler complex, you look at the chart ruling planet, the chart ruler's sign, the chart ruler's house, aspects to the chart ruler, and any other elevation by position of the chart ruler. But because we do not know what the Ascendant is, we do not have a chart ruler for him. So then we move on to the Sun complex. Now the Sun complex comprises of the Sun's sign, the Sun's house, the Sun's aspects, and any elevation by position that the Sun may have. Okay, so let's have a look. So the Sun now quite clearly is in Pisces. We have that. The Sun is in Pisces for him. The Sun's house is again unknown because we cannot work with houses because we don't have a birth time. Now we do have Sun aspects. The Sun is trine Uranus, that's the dark blue line. The Sun is also semi-sextile Venus, that is the green line. We then have the Sun quintile Saturn, the turquoise line, and the Sun is also quintile Pluto. So those are the 4 aspects that the Sun has. Next up would be the Moon complex, and typically we would be considering the Moon sign, the Moon's house, the Moon's aspects, the lunar phase, and any elevation by position the Moon may have within the chart. So clearly we're not exactly sure which sign the Moon's in. So as I said before, the Moon is either going to be in Sagittarius or in Capricorn, which are 2 entirely different signs. And if he was born in the morning, it will be in Sagittarius. And if he was born in the afternoon, it will be in Capricorn. So we do not know for sure which sign it will be, but we know it will be either Sagittarius or Capricorn. So that's quite clear. We did speak about this before, about how we're not quite sure where the Moon's going to be. So with the Moon's house, because we don't have houses, we cannot tell which house the Moon will be in either. Next up, we'll be looking at the Moon's potential aspect. And I say potential because we don't know exactly where the Moon was. However, we can see which aspects it could have had during the spread that the Moon would have had in that day. So it could be conjoined Neptune, it could be opposition Mars, it could be trine Jupiter, it could be trine Chiron, it could be sextile the Sun, and the Moon could be sextile Uranus. So there are actually 6 potential aspects in there that are there for the Moon, but it depends where the placement of the Moon is, whether or not these aspects will be in orb. If we don't know, we still can't use them, but you make a note anyway. So what we do have is the lunar phase, and the lunar phase for him is actually the last quarter. So the phase is taken from the Sun's position and you count back, and you can see clearly there on the diagram that the actual 45-degree sweep of the zodiac that is the last quarter phase, the Moon is in the last quarter. We can definitely take that to the bank. Next, we're going to be looking at if there's any major aspect patterns within the chart. So he actually does have a major aspect pattern. He's got a Mars Thor's hammer. Kind of interesting. So what that means is it's that triangle there on the diagram. So Venus squares Uranus, that is the red line between Venus and Uranus, and then both Venus and Uranus make a sesquiquadrate aspect to Mars, that's the two orange lines. So it's like a pointer within the chart pointing to Mars in Gemini. Now this may indicate that Mars is a more important planet in this guy's chart than we'd ever considered before. And Mars in Gemini is certainly quite active in Gemini fields of talking, studying, writing books and all the rest of it. And that is definitely shown there as well. So he has brought some original and yet stylish ways to approach the topics he covers in his book that has opened them up to a broader audience as well. So I do think this Thor's hammer needs careful consideration when doing an interpretation for this particular chart. As a small but mighty YouTube channel, I can grow through your support. And there are 5 ways that you can help me, and they're absolutely at no cost to you. The first thing you can do is tap the like button. The second thing is you can subscribe to the channel. You can then tap the notification bell so that you get information every time I post a video. You are welcome then to comment on any of my videos and share your views about what we spoke about. And then the fifth thing is that you can share the video with someone who would be interested. You just go down, click on the share, pick up the link, and you can text it on to your friends, mothers, daughters, whoever would be interested in this video. And I really do appreciate it. Yes, and not only I appreciate it, but YouTube will appreciate it as well. If you'd like to see more chart with me type videos such as this one about people that we know and love, or people who have done good things, then certainly let me know in the comments. If you have suggestions about whose chart I should be working on next, you can write it down there as well. Typically I like to work with people's charts who have done something, who have created them, innovated in some way and made life better for everybody else. I'm Alison Price. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.